So today we have Manav here from the Internal Finance team, who's also a growth marketing consultant, who's going to go over growth marketing and how it can really help your freelance business. So with that, go for it.
Thanks, Anna. Hi, everyone here. I'm Manav. I've been doing marketing and customer experience for about 10 years. I started in brick and mortar and hospitality and retail and, worked my way into digital. And now I help, brands of all sizes, mostly consumer brands, really kind of capitalize on their organic growth. It's very when companies start out, a lot of the times, and consultants too, and we've seen this, your first, getting word of mouth is it works out until it doesn't, and then you're scrambling when you actually have to be proactive about getting clients. So this is what we're going to talk about today. And oh, that's me. And in case you can't see me, that's me. And you can find me on Twitter and LinkedIn. Okay, so to everybody in the crowd, what does growth marketing mean? I'm gonna pick someone randomly. Irina.
Growth marketing, in my opinion, is ability to market yourself that could grow exponentially. Picking a channel that basically brings you the most clients.
So yeah, I mean that's definitely part of it, and that's good that you brought that up, because I think that a lot of times, and that goes to the next slide. Oh, and there's a lot of memes here, just beware. A lot of times, kind of going off of what you said, people do think that it's, there's a hack, right? Like you can take, do one thing, or do, have a tactic, or kind of really kind of expedite growth. The thing about it is that growth marketing is really evolved. And, people really want to be very convoluted and complicated when talking about it. This is something I found randomly online searching. It's just ridiculously wordy. But what growth marketing is marketing. To me, there's no distinction. A lot of people, again, think it's growth hacking. There's different things. Nowadays, you have to use data and analytics and everything you do, and especially when you're marketing, you have to understand, who you're targeting. You have to understand kind of how they're communicating with you, and really kind of look at the numbers. There's no way around it. So I don't really distinguish the two, and I think that I'm a growth marketing consultant because I use more data analytics to kind of educate my decisions, but really everybody should be doing that. So, okay, today, what we're going to cover is 4 main things. Knowing the customer, which is most important. Rethinking the marketing funnel, and automating the journey, and testing and confirming. So let's start. So knowing your customer.
I have a question first.
Yeah,
sorry.
Go ahead.
When someone asks or is looking for a growth hacker, is that what you just persuaded us not to do? There isn't such a thing. It's just marketing. It is what it is.
Yeah. So there's a kind of a dilemma, right? Like you have the industry and people still think of that term. So when you're talking to people, or when people are looking for a growth hacker, obviously I'm going to put my name in the game, or, hat in the ring. And the thing is that it's my job to really explain to them, growth marketing is never a quick thing. People think it's like, making something go viral, or guerrilla marketing. It's just something that you kind of put in there. But there's a lot of foundational stuff that most people don't do, that growth marketing really comes in there or myself as a growth marketer, you come in there, you understand that foundation, you have to build upon it. I would compare it to like a renovating your house, right? Like I can come in there and put new wood floors, I can put new sheetrock and paint the walls, but if your foundation is broken, then your house is still going to fall down no matter how much, wallpaper I put up. So that's really what a growth marketer does. It makes sure that there's a strong foundation to then kind of build a, ideally a skyscraper on top of it. It's been a long day. So the first step, and then again, talking about foundation, the first step in growth marketing is really knowing who the customer is. A lot of what growth marketing is to look at the numbers and look at the data and help that educate your decisions. And that really starts from knowing who you're targeting. Who is the ideal customer? What is that kind of path of least resistance for you to, get those sales and kind of build upon that niche. And I know most people, and I usually, I work with a lot of startups too. Everybody thinks they've done customer discovery, but what I've found is that the level of customer discovery they've done is basically they found their kind of innovators or early adopters. And stop me if you don't know the bell curve of adoption, but innovators and early adopters are really the first people that are going to try your stuff. What happens is, and what I brought up in the beginning, is that once you get to that early adopter phase, and people are referring each other, and you have a lot of interest, there is that point afterwards when you really want to scale and you want to get a really large number of people that may be outside of your kind of core demographic. And that's the difficult part, because your understanding comes from the people that were going to try you anyway. So really getting down to why someone would want to use you, or use your services, buy your product, whatever it may be, getting down to the kind of distilling down to what that motivation is, and then finding people like that, or finding people that have the same kind of problem that you can solve. And again, customer discovery is always going to be a hypothesis. It's not that you're never right, you're just always testing, and we get to that at the end. But really, you need to keep proving it, because your customer today may not be the same customer. For example, a company I work with is a grocery delivery service, and what they found is that they're actually getting a lot of young customers, master students that kind of graduate and they kind of get jobs, white collar jobs, and they're in the city, and then they actually grow up and they have kids and they move into the suburbs. So you actually with them to their entire journey, but that customer is different and their needs are different, and the products you're selling them are different. If you're still selling the person with parents, the parents with a kid, the same kind of fast food, heat, neat, microwavable stuff that you sold them as students, you're going to lose customers. So it's important to kind of keep up with customer discovery, keep talking to who your clients are. I think in this case, as consultants, you have one client at a time, you have a few clients at a time. It's always good to know where they're thinking ahead, where people other companies, other people like them are thinking, so that you can kind of be ahead of the game and in really meeting their needs. Because we all know what our strengths are, we all know where we sell services, but again, going to the point about growth hacking, growth marketing, whatever it may be, that all those kind of terminology, all that kind of what people think they need and what they actually need changes and evolves, and we just need to evolve with it. And this is what you do, right? You have to kind of monitor their action. I think that's where the kind of data comes in, right? Really look at how they're interacting with you, how they're what they're doing with the competitors, and that kind of goes into the know your industry. It's not only who they are, it's who else they're using, and not only that, what other kind of services are they using in their kind of lifestyle outside of the core kind of need that you solve, right? obviously talking to them is most important. Really finding out what the right questions are to ask so that you can kind of better educate your decisions. And segments too. Like when you have consumer, for consumer brands, really as you kind of monitor all this stuff, being able to segment the customers so that you really know how to talk to them individually and personalize the experience. I'll stop here. Any questions? No.
How long does like customer discovery take? Like if you do all of the things that you just talked about. And also, I guess, should it be ongoing?
It should be ongoing. I think in the beginning, it takes a bit longer. When I work with clients, I usually I try to separate out a month, for it, because, with, doing customer interviews and going through the data, of their actions and what they're doing, it does take a long time, because the collecting and getting the information is one thing, but then really kind of parsing it and making insights out of it is the big task. But yeah, it could take, it all depends on how much data there is, right? If it's a really kind of new company that doesn't have a lot of data, then it may not be, or a lot of customers, for example, like, Sahana knows this, like we couldn't get a lot of people for customer discovery at Mylands, so I talked to 3 people. If it was more, it would have taken a little bit longer, and not only longer for the interviews, but also longer to then take that data and then understand kind of their motivations. But I've done it in this less than a week. It's just, it's also understanding that, more time gives you more time to think about it. So, the insights will be different, but then again, you need to continuously do it. So it's never kind of just over and done with, unfortunately. Okay, so
I have a question real quick. Sorry.
sure.
Just going off the point you mentioned, like it was hard for us to find customers to, interview and try and get to know them. So in your experiences, have you tried anything that's really worked for you to, get those interviews or be able to connect with customers to have those conversations and go further with them?
That's a good question. It's really a numbers game, honestly. Sometimes you're just not going to get a lot of people to talk to, and that's where kind of experience and kind of insight from the market, and that's why industry data really educates a lot of it. I mean, if you can't get customer data, then you can try to find it somewhere else to kind of at least kind of flesh out the hypothesis. And that's the thing. And understanding that it is a hypothesis is really important, because otherwise you just get stuck in that phase and you won't move forward because you don't think you have enough data. Get enough that you're comfortable with, make your insights, and then figure out a way to, prove it. And then if that changes, then you make those changes. So what I like about growth marketing or doing it this way, it's that it's, it's very scientific for someone who's terrible at science, one thing. Secondly, it's, you're not stuck on anything, right? Because nothing is set in stone, and it shouldn't be. This is, I think about marketing, you think about consumers or client, companies, whatever it means, they're like living, breathing, fluid things. The fact that we think that one tactic, one strategy is going to work continuously. I mean, you look at, so like social ads, for example, and Sana, you're doing, we're working on the SEO and all those keywords now. That stuff, like, it has a half-life, and then those things, it change. So it's you have to just keep on your toes with it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, of course. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So rethinking the marketing funnel. We all know, have some idea what the marketing funnel is. Some people call it like the pirate. It's AAARRR. I don't remember what it means. It's ridiculous. So you have, uh, what is it? Anyway, there's a lot of very kind of complicated and dense ways to think about the marketing funnel, but in trying to simplify things as you want to do, I've come up with an acronym of myself by myself called EASL. And so um, I really wanted to think of another word for loyalty that started with a Y, but I couldn't, so I stuck with this. But the so it's eyeballs, action, sales, and loyalty. And these are really the four stages to me, and this is the way I really think about it when I work with clients, right? So let's think about eyeballs. So what does eyeballs mean, right? Eyeballs is basically your reach or your awareness. But the reason I call it eyeballs is because it's really about how many people see you and actually register what you're selling. And I really compare it to a street corner. Let's say you're in a street corner in New York. You're that corner you pick is basically kind of your marketing channel, right? And let's say you have to hold up a sign to sell something. That sign is your messaging. um, Understanding where your customers are and picking the right corner and writing the right messaging on the sign, that is really kind of how you gain the right awareness, because it's not just about the number of eyeballs, it's the who's the right um, the people to see it, and who's really qualified and who's going to come through the rest of the funnel. And it's really about getting in front of the right customers, right? Where are they, and how are you talking to them? And thinking about that in this stage, the top of the funnel, you're really thinking about the channels, your positioning, your messaging, and really going back to kind of the first step. What do your customers care about? If you don't know what their kind of motivations are, then you're really going to fall flat. And I've seen that so many times where companies, you're what's really valuable about your product, and what you kind of put into it, and it's really cool about it, but the customers really don't care. That's not literally why they use you or why they even want you. So it's like that, you're pushing something down their throat that they don't really want, and that's going to really really hurt sales. And I think, reach and awareness, they talk about it the most. Obviously, you want to get in front of a lot of people, but it's really getting in front of the right, qualified people. And so for me, I really track, click-through rates. It's like, who's going to actually be motivated enough to engage with that to move down funnel. And this is how I think about messaging. It's really, again, going off the foundation of knowing the customer. It's really these, picking kind of content themes that are in and around their lifestyle, around the product or service you're selling, and the type of voice. These are kind of the four main ones. Obviously, there's different ones, but really, you want to. This kind of runs the gamut into how you can kind of communicate with them in different ways. And for example, and I didn't change the font in the inside. So a company I work with, Subsidy Wallet, they're an Indian grocery delivery service. So I don't know if anybody can see the words on the inside, but basically, if you give me 1 second. Ooh. I'll change this back. There you go. Sorry about that. Now we can see. Okay. So going off of, if you think about a grocery delivery service that caters to kind of, ethnic consumers, you look at the themes that we use to target them, right? Culture, community, convenience, and the company, and how that subject matter kind of falls in the voice, right? Whereas talking about community, if you want to educate people, you talk about their city or neighborhood. Some practical advice would be local events, recipes for convenience. So again, we'll all have access to this, so you guys can see it later and ask any questions. But basically, the themes vary. and that really depends on the company or client you're targeting. But really thinking about it like this will give you a very easy way to kind of have it in one place and really know that, okay, you can touch on these different things as you try to communicate with your target audience. So action. So after they click, what's the next step, right? There is, in the consideration stage of the funnel, the discovery stage of the funnel, a lot of people, think it's really, it is the stage where people are, really researching you. They're trying to find out what you're about. They're comparing you to other, competitors or other services, right? But for me, in this case, that's all valid, but that doesn't really speak to the goal. It's I compare it to if you think about like Apple, they always move their keyboards like to a certain degree in the stores because you have to, in order to use them, you're going to have to move. It's not a comfortable position, so you have to move the screen, and because you kind of touch it and move it, you're a certain percentage point more likely to buy it because you took that action, you made that small commitment. And that's really what I want to do. You want to get people to make those small commitments, and that's what those actions are, right? You figured out what you're saying to them, you've got them to click, but what information do you want to get, which is the goal you have to determine, and how are you going to get that from them, right? And that's really kind of the goal now, at this point, because once you have that, because again, doing kind of paid advertising or, cold calling, cold leads, all that stuff, that it's very manual and it takes a lot of time. I think once you have that information from someone, you kind of can communicate them on a personal level. And that's what really I try to do at this point. And so tactics at this stage, I think, is really important, especially, I think, Irina, you're talking about a website. The homepage, having your own kind of homepage is great and stuff like that. But it's really important as you're talking to someone to really continue that conversation after they get to after they get to your page, right? So before, if you look at kind of what companies did, and what a lot of people still do now, you're sending a message to someone, and to two different types of people, and they're coming to the same place. And what's going to happen then is that they're going to really drop off because it's not resonating. You're not continuing that conversation. I mean, if we met, we're having a great conversation about really nice cars or something, and I take you outside and I have a bicycle, it's like it's not really going to register, that I actually knew what I was talking about. So I think right now what's important to do is really make sure that whatever messaging you're using with people, it reflects on the site. And maybe that is just a really tight landing page if you have this one service and one type of customer or client that you're targeting, making sure that that's kind of communicated on that homepage. But if you have, I mean, think about a resume, right? When do you ever send the same resume to or cover letters to multiple jobs? You have to cater to it. And in this case, it's the same thing. You want to, when you understand that segment or that specific client, you want to kind of cater the messaging on your site to them. I'll stop here. Any questions thus far? And I know that again, this was really, it is more focused on like the consumer companies. So if we have any questions specifically on how to kind of use this for targeting clients as a consultant, feel free to ask, and I can, we can kind of talk about it in that respect.
So I don't have a website either, but in terms of a landing page and or a homepage, I've seen a few other freelancers just have the homepage is the landing page for everything, and it's sort of like a personalized link tree, and so it just like has, I don't know, whatever, a plain background and then just like different icons, then it takes you to whatever it is that they're talking about, like whether it be their social media or their Medium blog or I don't know, their email. Is that not okay, but like, is that helpful? Or in terms of creating a website, like if like should we actually have something that's more interactive than just like a landing page?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think so I guess first it depends on, the type of consultant you are and the type of client you're targeting. There are some, and I've worked with those people too. They barely even go on LinkedIn, right? They want, something PDF, like email to them. So that depends. And that's another thing I will say. And one thing I said, when I used to advise kind of really early stage startup with still in pitch mode, you have to think about kind of where people are seeing you too. Like right now is for startups, everybody does kind of a PDF pitch that's only really viewable on the computer, but everybody's on their phone. So why isn't anybody doing kind of vertical pitch decks? So that's kind of, so it's really understanding like how people are using. So in the case, like if you're, if you know that, someone wants to see different parts of you, I think the link tree or those kind of multiple link websites, it's it's a good kind of medium, right? Because then you send them a link and they can decide kind of where they want to go to. The risk there is they go to somewhere where you don't necessarily want to. I'm a big believer in um, getting sending people to the place where you want them to go, right? It's like figure out the goal and then get them there. That said, if you know your service, right? And and your client is very educated on what you offer and needs that specific thing, then your LinkedIn or a short portfolio will be fine, because that communicate, there's no break in that kind of understanding, right? I think a lot of times, especially doing uh, what I do, it gets confusing, and that's why what I do something. So a lot of them come through referrals, but what I do in that process is I'll make personalized proposals for everybody. So it's not just one proposal. It's like using their branding, using their images. And so what that does is twofold. Not only does it say what I'm going to do for them, but also it kind of communicates back kind of the value proposition and what I offer, which is it's not just a service. It's really in service to them, using their kind of skills too. So that's kind of my way of kind of keeping that communication. Like, yeah, you get a referral, but then you still have to you still have to convince them. So the referral is kind of they click through, right? And now that the way I communicate that individually, that personalized experience, is through that proposal. But if you're, if I was doing I don't know, like email marketing, right? Like that's literally, I just did email marketing, and that's all I did, and I did that well. And a client needed email marketing, and they're like, I need someone to help me with emails. Then that's kind of a one-to-one. That doesn't, a website's not going to really make or break you there, because then you can just kind of speak to the clients, your numbers and stuff on your LinkedIn or whatever, like Behance or whatever kind of profile you want to send them to. And there's plenty of opportunities to do that, or eventually a MyLance profile, right? Whatever that may be. You can do that. I think it's just really making sure that conversation you have or you want to have with the client is not broken when they see when they come to, when they meet you or they come to your kind of front facing site or profile. That makes sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, so now you got them taking action. They're giving you email, phone number, what have you. How do you get them to buy? So I really use this portion to get people off the fence. there's that transition from action to sales. When you've done everything already, when you know who your customers are, you really communicated with the right people at the top of funnel, you've got their email, and you're showing them how you're providing them value, the sales will come naturally, right? At this point, what you really want to do is make sure there's no one that's that's on the fence or that's kind of questioning, or what are those what are those breaks in the customer experience. Is there people that are not understanding something about what you offer? Is there are there issues in the journey when regarding price or something, or people are dropping off at a certain point? I think that works just as well for consultants. It's like if you're, send proposals to a lot of people and they all, they're good up until you send the proposal, then there's something there. Maybe it's the price, maybe it's the timeline, whatever it may be. So, and that's where kind of the data comes in, where you need to, test and iterate. So, and that's where kind of, what you need to think about is really, what else can you do to provide value? I think as a lot of people will automatically lean on discounts, like, hey, I'll give you this much off my rate, or why don't you uh, take 10% off this product or free month of service. That's fine, but I think that what people don't understand is mentally a discount doesn't equal value, right? A customer or a client, think when you give them a discount, they're thinking they're getting one over on you, not that you're giving them something more. So being able to provide value, right? Doing something pro bono, whatever it may be, or like, hey, listen, like you do this, I'll throw this in too. And obviously you have to make sure what works for you as far as P&L goes, um, but that's kind of like, oh, they feel like they're getting value, and they also don't feel like they're taking advantage of you, which is kind of a negative thing, because you still want the leverage in the sense of you are the expert and you need to know that. And I think a lot of people, I think it was, through Bradley, one quote I heard in something he wrote was, if you're not uncomfortable with what you're charging, you're probably not charging enough. So in that sense, it's because you don't know your value, and you don't want to dilute that by discounting. And that goes for anything. It goes for products, services, or consultants. I would always rather find another way around it. Like, hey, listen, if this is too much upfront for you, like we can spread it out over that. It's like you're still getting the same amount, but you're doing them a favor rather than them taking something from you. So this is kind of what I was talking about, right? This may be hard to read here. Everybody's going to be able to get a copy of this, and the link is at the bottom. This is back in 2015, so you can see how ahead of the curve, Bain and company is. But these are really the lifestyle and value drivers for the consumers, but it's really kind of for everybody, right? What are these things that you can kind of play on that will provide them value without you giving them discounts? Obviously, how to, reducing risk down there, right? I think that's a lot of times when companies or clients hire consultants, it is a risk, right? Because you're taking a chance of someone, whether it's a referral, even though they worked with, it still is inherently risky, because it's not what people are used to as far as kind of full-time employees, at-will employees, right? Where you go through HR and it's different. So how do you reduce that risk? How do you make them feel better about that? I mean, that's one example, and there's plenty of others here that you can play on. But in keeping these in mind when you're keeping these kind of values in mind when you're negotiating and when you're talking to a client is important, because you can, again, not discount what you're doing, but be able to also get what you're worth, and make them feel like they're getting it as well. Any questions so far? All right. So after you make that sale, the next part is loyalty. And a lot of people call this, different things. Retention is probably the main one. The reason I call it loyalty is because loyalty, or being loyal is it's an emotional decision, and I like to think about it that way because you want that relationship to build to the point where they do feel that loyalty. They're not. It's not just they're not coming to you back to you just because they can or because it's a utility, because they really feel kind of intrinsically that um, they value what you offer and they align with your brand. Uh, and that's what it is, right? It's emotional response. You need to keep that flame going, right? It's as Chris Rock says, he was talking about his wife. It's like, your wife is always going to love you, but you have to work on getting her to like you, and that's what it is. With a customer, it's the same thing. They purchased from you, maybe they've gotten subscription, and you're the recurring revenue, but doesn't mean you can't rest on your laurels. I worked with companies like in the health and wellness space, and I think that a lot of times when um, you have a recurring revenue, you're like, okay, they're good. Like this is something that they need. They're using it. It's helping them with their health. But there's a lot of drop offs. Why? Because you're not continuing that conversation. There's, getting involved in their lifestyle and really kind of keeping up with them is important. And when you're thinking about that, it's like, how often do you want them to come back? And how do you upsell them? And it doesn't have to be upselling in the sense of actually purchasing something, but how do you get them to take more actions? Are there things like this, like webinars, or can you get on a call with them? Customer discovery is a good way to keep that up too, because you're really you're not asking them to buy anything. You kind of want them to do you a favor and give you information, feedback, and that kind of stuff. So that really helps. And I always think of customer service too, or even like even for consultants, I think having kind of an FAQ somewhere is something that a lot of people don't think about, but it's helpful because even clients have questions, right? So if you can answer them at a glance, that'll kind of keep the conversation going. Okay, any questions thus far? No. Okay. So workflows. Really, what you want to do is when you kind of, understand how your potential customer client is working and how you're communicating with them. There's going to be processes that you can automate. Now, there's a lot of automation software out there, and we can go through some examples. But whatever you can kind of that communication you can automate, even if it is just kind of email communication, even if it is something like following up, it's really important. And I think the reason is because at some point you're not going to be able to keep up all these conversations yourself and manually, right? So if you can automate kind of welcome or onboarding conversations, it's important because that not only gets it off your plate, but it keeps there's no lapse in the flow of communication to your customer or client. And I think this works just as well for consultants. When you have kind of a lot of clients on your plate, or even one, right? Do we prioritize this kind of uh, like post-purchase thank you, those kind of things? Maybe we may send a note, and then obviously we start working, but it may be advantageous to kind of automate these, because you never know when you'll drop off or you want to pick it back up. Also, I think re-engagement or win back flows are great too. Yeah, we have calendar reminders to kind of follow up with these clients, but you could throw them in automation and make sure that they get engaged right at the right time.
Is there a how do you make it so that it's not like, I guess, super salesy, right? Like if we're just a one-person freelancer or consultant, and we're doing these things and we have like an automated sort of like catch-up thing, I guess, like obviously it has to do with like writing and doing all of those things well, but it sort of feels maybe like less authentic.
It will feel like that. It's so again, I'm gonna going back to the beginning of knowing your customer, right? You kind of know what's working with them, and then I touched on segmentation too. Again, for the consultant, it kind of is specialized and has the you know uh, not one type of client per se, but like is of one service to multiple clients. That kind of conversation and that language can be kind of standardized. Again, you want to make it colloquial. It's still an email, but you'll be able to kind of and you'll have done this manually, right? So kind of taking from that and kind of automating this. Again, this is not big conversations that you're having through automation, but just being able to kind of um, uh, uh, put someone in a journey so that when you're starting with them, or if they drop off, I think is a big thing for consultants, because a lot of times those fall to the wayside by the conversations you're having actively. So that's something where you can kind of automate that, throw an email in there, and then add a particular cadence or however long you want, whether it's every month, every 2 months. It sends them a message automatically, just asking them how they're doing, and how whatever they needed your service for in the beginning is working out for them now. And there's a lot of kind of templates, tutorials, all that stuff online, and kind of language as far as win back. I would say that for consultants specifically, I think that's a really important one. The welcome and onboarding, I mean, when you get to the point where you're juggling that many clients and you would have to automate that, that's kind of a different story. But I do think and I put abandoned cart here, but when someone is like, doesn't, follow up with the contract, or kind of drops off, or, is not interested at the moment, but says to call, come back later, you could, um, put a calendar reminder. But if you have an automation, they'll just do it automatically, and then you'll be able to kind of, take that out of your head and know that things are going to get communicated at the time you want.
Thanks.
So, does that help? All right. So, testing. All this is about testing. Everything that I'm saying now is something you want to try, and you want to try for a time period, and make sure you're tracking and change. The time period is subjective, depending on what you're testing. For example, if I'm testing kind of paid social, I would do kind of week-long tests, right? Email campaigns and stuff like that, just in generally they're longer life cycles overall. You want to get a bit more data from them. But that being said, make sure, and Becca, you sent the email out. Make sure the goals, um, uh, make sure the goals are smart, right? And that you're really tracking things to the you're really tracking certain specific KPIs that make a difference to you and what your customer really wants, so that you can make those changes as need be. I had another slide, but I don't know what happened to it. But if anybody wants to know about SMART goals, there was a great newsletter and blog post that went out today, so on mylance.co. So yeah, that is that. And the thing about testing is, it's very subjective, and there's no one size fits all. There's different tactics you can try when it comes to testing. Where, let's say emails, subject line, trying different things to different segments, but it all depends on kind of the medium the channel and your customer. But I mean, if there's any specific kind of questions about testing, I'm happy to answer.
In your opinion, is there anything that has maybe been overlooked when testing, like with Mylance and like the community?
You mean like what we're doing now as far as?
Yeah, like is there, in your opinion, like something that we're obviously missing or should be testing, I guess, to tie it in?
I think we're getting to that point now, as we, we're really at the testing phase now. A lot of what we've been doing up to this point is optimizing. So I think, one thing that I will, like, we're further along, I would say, with the content and the community, the content, and like what Sana is doing with the SEO, right? We're actually kind of further along with those. So making sure now that as these are more consistent, and as these are, we're getting more engagement, it's like, what are we tracking specifically, right? I know a lot of times you and I, Rebecca, go back and forth on the subject line, right? Do we want to, because we have a new CRM now, do we want to start A/B testing, subject lines, right? Those kind of things, like what's working, what's not. And as we get to, as we fill out the kind of lists and the segments and stuff, we'll be able to kind of test those too. And so, yeah, those kind of things, it's just, there's, a lot of foundational aspects still left, but I think as far as content, and as we get these kind of resources out there, we'll be able to test kind of what works on the landing page, and we'll be even able to kind of put different landing pages up regularly, kind of see like, okay, what's working for people. And the idea really is moving forward, to have different landing pages for each resource, so that people, when they come to the site, they see something different, and it provides them a different kind of type of value. So that was great, and I'm right under time. Irina, I would love to know, I know that it was kind of more consumer based, but I would love to know kind of what you thought, if you thought any of it was actionable, or if you have any questions specifically about how you can use this stuff for yourself.
I think this was definitely really interesting. And as far as the actions for myself, I think I'm at the point where I don't have anything to test, but at the same time, if, I'm fairly new to running my own business, but at some point, as I do grow, automating some emails might be something to think about. So this was definitely more of a future reference, which was really helpful. Yes, so thank you.
Yeah, and I think that more than that, I think what your services are, what you offer, and it's really finding the best way to communicate that to your potential clients. And right, we all have our hands full. I mean, there's no, as one person, consultant, it's only so many clients you can handle.
Absolutely.
But just thinking about it as you move forward and have to actively get there. But again, I'm here. I mean, find me on, you have my email or whatever. Feel free to reach out when you get to that point.
Absolutely, will do. Yes, and I think you gave me a little bit more things to think about when it comes to having a website or having different landing pages or not having it at all, right? So it really depends where you are in your consultant journey.
Yeah, and what your clients want to see. I mean, if you're able to communicate value and everything. Again, I think I'm here, and usually when I'm working with companies, it's at a point where they've overgrown the word of mouth referral stage, and they have to actively go get people, which happens to all of us. So just kind of preparing for that, like, are you are you ready for the time when you need to, you know, cold email or something, and you don't have any kind of warm introduction. So I think it's just thinking about that. But
Absolutely.
again, I'm in New York, so I'm always on edge. So
No, I mean that completely makes sense. Warm introductions are always great, but there is always that time where you're just kind of waiting and there's nothing. So being proactive and potentially thinking about all the things you talked about is
yeah. And
very
I'm thinking
helpful.
about it, you know, maybe more pessimistically, but there may be the kind of white whale, you know, the Ahab of clients that you really want, that company that you're just, you know, dying to get, and you're trying to find a way around it, but you know you know they're looking for someone like you, and you know you can provide them value. So how do you kind of, you know, work that in, you know, your way up there, or present yourself to them. So there's always that option too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thanks for tuning in, Irina.
Yes, great job, Manav. That was very insightful. Also, loved all the memes throughout. So that was great. And yeah, I'll go ahead and stop the recording right now.